Both the 1996 and 2020 cinematic adaptations of Jane Austen's Emma faithfully portray the comedic novel's absurd society. However, I'd argue the 2020 version, directed by Autumn de Wilde, more effectively capitalizes on the filmmaking medium for its humor to really reproduce the ambience of the novel. Whereas Douglas McGrath's 1996 film takes a more literary approach and falls somewhat two-dimensional in comparison. Sarah Lingo analyzes that Jane Austen's female characters retain agency by playing within the rigid restrictions of society, noting their subversive humor. The frivolity with which affairs such as matchmaking and proposals are depicted pokes fun at gendered societies that places these things on a pedestal for women. Thus, a crucial element of the novel's humor is presenting mundane events that are highly critical for the characters in a way that is ridiculous for readers.
To give life to a mewling infant who will import disease each time it enters the house.
Note how Mr. Woodhouse is placed in center frame and how we see Emma smirk. In the novel, Mr. Woodhouse's constant complaining about drafts and illnesses is scarcely a source of humor for the characters, acting as a background droning that is only amusing to the readers. McGrath betrays his layered style and essentially tells us to focus on Mr. Woodhouse and find him funny with these visual cues, losing the wit of the novel and creating a linearity in the audience's attention. De Wilde's version is more faithful in portraying Mr. Woodhouse as a kind of nuisance for the characters, but a farce for the audience. This can be accounted to, at least in part, the film's higher visual energy. While McGrath's version utilizes more straightforward blocking and camera work, De Wilde's lively visuals lend themselves to a more natural humor style, such as walking past Mr. Woodhouse looking like this in the middle of an argument. As Rita Dashwood and Andrew McInnes argue, this version leans into the ridiculousness of characters and situations.
A chill draft. A chill and sickly draft.
McGrath creates a more wholesome depiction of Emma. He maintains her scheming personality, but keeps her mostly prim and proper. When describing De Wilde's Emma, Dashwood and McInnes bring up Devaney Loser's term Jane Austen camp, which he defines as playful exaggeration and mild sexual surprise. This is not limited to her character. The modal elements De Wilde utilizes to do this are manifold. Aside from the camera work and blocking mentioned prior, one element is the extravagant set design in comparison to McGrath's more conventional period production. Another is the film's inherent musicality, which heightens absurdity. De Wilde's version has a subtle choreographed feel, and the ridiculousness or campness reflects that of the novel, where something simple is presented as a crucial plot point that is silly for the audience. Furthermore, actors in De Wilde's version opt for dramatization in their performance. Let's take a closer look at how this all plays out, using the introduction of Mr. Elton's new wife. McGrath's version cues in Mrs. Elton's arrival using narration as Emma writes a letter.
Grim job to be done. Mr. Elton is bringing his new wife to tea.
This works well in a novel, but examining De Wilde's version demonstrates how to show rather than tell in filmmaking. De Wilde presents the inanity of the society by dramatizing this moment where the new Mrs. Elton sits in Emma and her father's usual spot. See how musicality transforms the essence of the text effectively into visuals. The simple act of settling in somewhere she was not welcome is depicted in a way that reflects Emma's perception of Mrs. Elton in the book, where we read, "She suspected that there was no elegance. Ease, but not elegance. She was almost sure that for a young woman, a stranger, a bride, there was too much ease." Quirky humor is added to a moment that is serious in the character's eyes through the musicality. Neither versions do anything radical with the camera work in this scene, both alternating between 3 or so simple shot setups. As such, the way camera work is used to create the comedic ambience is not demonstrated. However, De Wilde's simplistic camera work can be seen as complementing and balancing the other modal elements in the scene, which are anything but dull. Take, for example, the set design and blocking. Tara Moore analyzes De Wilde's humor as establishing an ironic cinematic gaze, one that invites audiences to see what the privileged characters fail to see. The set design in this version places the mundane dialogue in absurdity.
I was fancying myself at Maple Grove. The staircase, as I came in, I observed how very like the staircase is, placed in exactly the same part of the house.
which is critical to how we perceive Emma's society. Even if the camera work is simple, the crowding of extravagant pastries and cakes in front of the characters, and constant movement of servants adding and taking away, not only creates visual layers, but makes us struggle to take the conversation seriously, even though it is evidently very serious for Emma, as seen with Anya Taylor-Joy's performance, which will be discussed. As such, Tara Moore's analysis rings particularly true, as characters are once again blind to the absurdity of their conditions, which is what makes the story particularly amusing. Gwyneth Paltrow's performance is certainly effective at depicting Emma's distaste for Mrs. Elton's manners, when she, for example, affectionately calls Mr. Knightley simply Knightley, which astounds Emma for its informality. Furthermore, the humorous dynamic between husband and wife is presented with this physical comedy. However, an important quote from this scene in the novel is simply that Emma was silenced. Anya Taylor-Joy's astonishment at these comments is presented less as polite quietness in the face of Mrs. Elton's rambling as Paltrow's is, and more as being utterly silenced by bewilderment. As such, we see how McGrath makes Emma well-mannered for the most part, while de Wilde more accurately presents her judgmental nature. Overall, de Wilde's utilization of the many facets of filmmaking not only recounts the story of Emma, but recreates it in both tone and visuals, specifically emphasizing the humorous and ironic style. McGrath's version is certainly accurate and makes solid attempts to replicate Austen's wit, yet seems to favor the accuracy of plot over how the plot is told.